You're tuned into Taiwan Grooves. Let's explore the local music scene. Good afternoon, people, and welcome to Taiwan Grooves. I'm your host, Phil Eskowski, and today we're gonna take a break from popular music and have today's guest help us explore and understand ancient folk traditions and contemporary sounds. And for that, we'll need the help of Steev Kindwald, who has over the past 13 years immersed himself in the folk and tribal music of Asia, blending influences from Indonesia, India, Myanmar, and beyond into his distinctive style, which combines rhythmic jazz, gypsy cadence, and harmonic drones. Steev plays a variety of traditional instruments, including the Harp and double flute, which are deeply rooted in the farming and herding cultures of his ancestors. Steev invites listeners on a sound journey, celebrating timeless traditions while creating something new and evocative. And luckily, Steev was kind enough to bring his instruments right here in the studio and perform live for us. So before we begin with our interview and talk about ancient folk traditions, let's hear a sample of Steev's performance. Give a warm welcome, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. That's great. Wow. Welcome to the studio. We have a flute musician from Japan in here in Taiwan for a few days. You're visiting for how many days?
Let's see. I came for the Taiwan World Harp Festival. Yeah. And then I played also before the festival in Pingling. Pingling.
Okay.
Where's the Baozongcha place?
Yes, I was just there 2 weeks ago. Nice.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
So Taiwan is beautiful, and the contact with the people is really quite amazing. People are very collaborative, I find here.
Yeah. Welcome, and thank you so much for this live performance. Very pleasurable to hear, and I don't think I have ever seen anybody play three. Okay, well, let's start with, what is the instrument that you were just playing?
Okay, so I'm actually steeped within the tradition of double flutes, primarily from the lower Indus Valley, Thar Desert between India and today Pakistan. And so these flutes are in a very specific range, and mostly today desert peoples, shepherds, Sufis, gypsy persons, or whatever we can say, Ram people, which is the roots, right?
Right.
And nomadic peoples and tribal peoples.
Okay.
The root is, of course, tribal. I've been steeped in that tradition various traditions for around 25 years plus. So there's the base there. I study with various sorts of primarily tribal and Sufi musicians I deeply study with. Since years I have a master and such. And then, so being inside of a tradition, you also want to create something as an outside person, being inside. So the double flutes are part of that tradition. Many names could be Alguza, we usually use the word Paba, Bina, Bit Jodi. There's many names, Jodia Pawa, so many names for these instruments.
All right.
Because you're basically thinking of nomadic or people who are on the move. So the average illiterate person of those regions can speak 4 or 5 languages, definitely fluently. So every item has 3 to 4 words easily. So the double flutes are of that ilk. We can say the double flutes would be like, here's the double, kind of classic feeling.
So one is constantly going?
Yes, we have a drone, which we call nar, like a drone, if we will, once note.
Yes.
Called nar, and then the Mahdi is she likes to sing, right? Right, so basically the image of nar, it's actually reversed of what a Western or typical Asiatic image is. The drone is called nar, which actually is male, keeping the bass, which we imagine the female, in fact. And then their image of the Mahdi, the singer, right, the chanter, would be actually female who's talking a lot and enjoying and very playful.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then I added another Mahdi, another singer, and that's kind of my creation. Japanese, I call this sambon bue. It's basically a type of triple flute with 2 chanters and then 1 drone. So the chanters can play around a minor fourth. It's relatively a minor fourth because it's in a harmonic scale.
Right.
So they can play across each other, they can play with each other. So you get a lot of possibilities, like a tetrachord would be probably how it's explained in Western musical terms.
All right. I'm going to pretend that I'm a complete amateur, which I am, in these instruments. So I would like to know, what are these 3, can I call them in general pipes or flutes?
Yeah, they're simply just recorders.
Recorders.
And then what's really going on, though, is perhaps the most curious part of it, is that, of course, there's circular breathing, so it continues. If it stops, it's not nice, right? So the drone must continue. So means the mouth has to separate by using the tongue and the throat in order to stop and start, staccato, we can say, and then control the pressure so the drone is stable. And then the chanter is able to change the octave and play, half notes and such. And then, so the tongue is doing all this fun stuff. Then the throat, or the lower half of the tongue with the throat, the upper part of the throat, is actually pumping and playing an actual rhythm within that. So just a little demonstration, you can imagine. Right, so that would be 2 pieces. So the tongue is in conjunction with, actually it's a little bit of the lower diaphragm.
Yeah.
But it's a very light breath. And then the tongue itself is in conjunction to control the halves plus do a little bit of staccato work with the chant. And then the actual rhythmic, we can say we're flowing into the song, or we can say the melody. That's another technique. And then that would allow the rhythm to be kind of a third sound. The drone, the chanter, and then the rhythmic sense. Because if you blow flat, you can in some traditions, but it's less charming, right? Right. And this is an instrument of charm. And so these instruments, the double flutes, the triple is my actually creation. So the double flutes, in fact, is used for shepherds. It's used for entertainment and ceremonies. Lately, it's used for concerts and such in an international sense. And they're used for healing and trance work, which is very suitable, this kind of trance-oriented thing.
For sure, yeah.
And then the triple flutes do exist in some very small traditions in Pakistan, and that would be 2 or 3 drones. So the chanter itself is staying within its range, and then the drone is within a fifth or an octave even. So this creation of the 2 chanters creates another sort of mood, we can say, right? Right, kind of like a little choir.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. Just for the listeners, I know it's impossible to see, but that requires a huge amount of breath work and control. Because normal people just breathe and just regularly. But I see there's a lot of things going on that I could not replicate at all.
Wait, we could say that the charming and Taiwanese listeners will enjoy this. It reminds one of a frog, actually. The cheeks themselves, if you can see, but if you can imagine,
yes.
My cheeks are kind of pumping, in fact.
Pumping like a bass, like a heart, basically.
So we trained for years to create a sort of muscle memory and a certain level of musculature, in fact. So to create this sound. And then each player has kind of their style, how deeply they enunciate or pump that rhythm.
Sure.
Some people, it's almost inaudible. And some people, it's quite strong. Some people are more accented. There's so many styles, different kinds of rhythms as well. I'm playing a little more straight, at least this piece, because it's just the feeling. But there's a lot of rhythms available to this music, traditional, and within my work, because I like to play like, a 54 rhythm, a 17, a 13, a 5, because it creates a different frequency and it's kind of dancing in a sense.
Yeah. If the drone wasn't present that much, and if you weren't to tell me that it's from Indiana, Pakistan kind of whereabouts, my head would just go into perhaps like an, 1500s British royal family with knights and festives. Something, it just felt cheerful and happy.
Certainly.
But once you say shepherd, it also kind of makes sense. Because paints the perfect picture. You have a lot of time. You have your hands kind of, not empty, but... and you just go about your journey, about your day, and you're just whistling beautiful tunes. So,
and a lot of it would be, this is the deeper sort of realm, would be communication with your animals and your herd and your shepherd dog. So a lot of older traditions will use the instruments for communication, for signaling it's time to go home or drink the water, we're here. Because the animals may not
associate with tune. Wow.
So that's a way when the humans were communicating with animals strongly. And then a warning perhaps and such, or a signal to the dog, right? Because they're actually whistles. So these whistles, we don't know, but I can find no old depictions in Indian archaeology, Indian art, the greater Indian subcontinent. So that leads me to believe possibly these flutes came actually with... we could say when Westerners were coming, long before colonialism, coming through into Southern Asia. Because the whistle flutes, you find enormous amount of pictography and writings from Central and Eastern and actually Western Europe as well. Enormous amount of double, triple whistle flutes in a folk context, in a dance context, and perhaps in a light classical context.
Right.
So that may be, in fact, because we imagine everything's from Asia, right? Right. So in fact, maybe the Westerners actually were, influencing, right, in that time of, we can say, a lesser Silk Road.
Sure, yeah.
Right, the lesser Silk Road.
Wow, very nice. Could I ask you, what are the instruments made of?
Oh, so these, this will even be slightly more charming. The drone itself I made because I had a lot of questions with the humidity here. So this is actually from a hot water plastic pipe from India. Okay. So, and a piece of wood I carved myself.
So durable.
Durable, certainly. And yeah, it does the job. I have also wood piece as well I can share. So it has a much of a more antique quality to it. And then the flutes themselves, the chanters are made from a type of catechu, perhaps plant. We call it ker or kirar or which is basically a hardy desert plant, slow growing, and has a certain antibacterial quality to it, interestingly enough. And we also harvest the fruits and use that for pickles and such. Any plant in the desert will have an enormous amount of life surrounding that, and building soil, and birds live in there. Insects are absolutely necessary for the biosphere of the desert. So it has a lot of meaning, in a sense. And these are very slow-growing, very dense wood, not hard, but dense, semi-hard, and is very common in the desert. So it has this sort of total quality to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So just to sum it up, we got a drone and 2
chanters. Yeah, like whistle flutes. And one more thing for Taiwan lovers. Bing lang, right? Bing lang, yeah. Bing lang is so important here. Some of my oldest flutes are made from bing lang wood. It's a very valuable wood and may have existed when the desert was more warm, was more humid. So in fact, we call it subari or hubari or pinang, right? In Malay, we use that word in Marwari or Sindhi. So it means that wood, this very kind of light, sort of airy wood, is used for flute making.
That's a good thing to use that wood because it's quite fast growing.
Exactly.
And nowadays I heard it's taking over a lot of biosphere and it's just pushing out the other trees.
I see.
I heard somebody told me this becoming a problem because there's too many of them. Their fruits just drop down, start to grow again, and you see like a lot of forest just little by little taken over by it.
Oh, Bing Lang's taking over. So the Bing Lang, let's make flutes.
See, that's why we need you to come down and just make thousands of flutes for everybody. It's
a beautiful project. So some of these flutes, I mean, why it's interesting as well in that in those regions, these are very valued flutes. Somehow there's a quality to the sound and such. I have 2 pairs in my collection in years of collecting because it's almost impossible to get them. And people now are not making them because the wood's not there. However, Taiwan, we got lots of it here. So we can get some flute projects going.
Right. All right, excellent. I am very interested in how does one come to an instrument like this? In general, you begin with something that was passed on to you, some tradition. And since you're not from India or Pakistan, right? So then I want to know, how did you not end up with a piano, a guitar, or something else? Why this instrument?
Right, good question.
These instruments.
Yeah, certainly. No, certainly. So basically, I grew up around very strong original jazz and Western classical. So the bass was like serious quality art music. That's what we knew as music. That's what this definition of music was.
Right.
And then in my village library, this is interesting by chance, we were lucky enough to have a large amount of these records of ethnic music from old field recordings of very analog feeling. And so I grew up around a lot of ethnic music from around the world. So to me, that was what music was. So these sounds to me were very, normal, I feel. And then when the double flutes, I've seen them in various traditions, and I was very interested in circular breath, right?
Yeah.
Right. So when you enjoy the play of breath, it's kind of a yoga thing.
Definitely.
So the double flutes are the great practice of circular breath and techniques involving, we can say, like trance, meditation, what have you, dreaming, and then rhythm work. And then you have this bonus of melody and songs and everything else. So it kind of drew me in. And then when I came to India, I was, that's it. My life is changing. I'm doing this. So I gave my life to it. And my teacher, my main master, he told me, he said, after 20 years, the sound becomes good.
Wow.
Right. So they're asking your life in exchange for this work.
That's exactly what I heard when I interviewed 2 gentlemen from India. They were professional flute players. And it was just from generation to generation. Like his father was a professional flute musician. And it just took them almost whole life. And they wouldn't even say that they mastered the instrument.
Oh, no. We're just beginning. We're just
insane.
Tasting.
Yeah.
We're tasting it's a very typical thing. Yeah. We're tasting but a drop of the ocean of music.
Wow.
So it's a lifelong study. And then, Japan would say kodawari. Kodawari is the concept of always trying to improve.
Right. That's
being satisfied is good, but you really wish to improve and appreciate that process of improvement. Even the failures are important. I made a lot of failures and I continue to. So that's part of the pleasure because it keeps you maybe humble perhaps. And it also allows you to always have room for improvement, but also to say thanks to what you have learned. And I'm outside of the tradition, but actually what really drew me in, the double flutes, I was, excited about music or whatever as a foreigner. But what really also drew me in was the life in the desert. That drew me in deeply, the food, the language, the music, the sort of spiritual practices, not religion, but spiritual sensibility, the animals, the climate, the harvesting of water, the various enormous amount of languages that are there, and the clothing, all of it really drew me in.
Right.
So the desert felt far beyond music, right? Because mere music, I guess, is sort of a modern concept, but it's integrated within the life and such.
Right.
So we need to catch these bees to get the wild wax for the... I tune all these, they're not visual, but you can't see it, but all these flutes are heavily tuned and fine-tuned with wax.
Mm-hmm.
So I collect wax, beeswax wherever I go. So I'm always with children or what have you who love to collect the wild, very small bees' nests in certain seasons when they're there before the rains. So all of it's very integrated. And there's the wild desert fruits, there's the wild desert plants, there's the grains that have been there since definitely more than 5,000 years. So then the music reflects this.
Yeah.
Being in the sandstorms and when the wild rains come and suddenly this land becomes a river. The nature is fierce there, absolutely fierce. So I prefer actually going in summertime when it's usually around 45 to 50 degrees. So actually the people are more vibrant because that's what they know as life, in fact. So in this winter when foreigners are going because it's more comfortable, we can say, the people are kind of suffering, the local people. And then when the summer they brighten up and they're just very vibrant feeling. The energies, the attitude, the clothing, everything just becomes more vibrant. So that's when the desert literally blooms and the people bloom.
That's
and then
incredible.
The flutes sound the best after around 40, 45 degrees. They like it.
You need the dryness.
We love it, the dryness, and they open up, and the heat and the sunlight is very intense. We don't relax in the sunlight, of course. We're into shade very much. Oh, and there's the desert air conditioning, which is wonderful. You take a wall of brambo, like these broken twigs and sharp pieces of wood, like twigs, and then you make a wall of this, and then you put some whatever used clothing or what have you, this very thin cloth, and you throw water into it, and the winds come, you get aircon. There you are.
Very smart.
The best aircon. And it's actually doesn't matter how much money you got, you need that. You need that. So wealth separates everyone in the desert because it means nothing.
The equality there. Everybody's sweating equally.
Sweating, actually, you don't sweat that much, but you feel the strength of the sun. It drains you. So water becomes medicine.
Yeah.
It's no longer water at that point. So you appreciate everything you have. And then the night comes, it's extremely cold suddenly. And that's fascinating as well. And then the sky you have every movie you've ever imagined in your life whizzing around you because the sky is so pure.
Right. Even though it sounds kind of scary and unimaginable from city life, but still, just when you speak about it, it should draw everybody just to experience it and see it like, wow, this is how people live here. This is how we live there. I have a question about still your past, if I may.
Please.
Once you found your calling or this sense of music, did you immediately head to India, or did you first seek for someone and purchase or somehow got in your hands on the instrument itself first and start practicing?
Okay, so we're back to Taiwan, right? So in fact, I heard some recordings and I saw photos since I was young. Then I went to one of the many Chinatowns in the world, right? So not Taiwan, I understand, but certainly this Han connection. And I bought some very cheap bamboo flutes, right? And then I just got some wax and I put it together and practiced on that. And it's good enough. That's humbling, right? And in fact, the people in the desert, they do similar things because the instruments generally are very hard to get. And the good ones are harder to get.
Yeah.
The families hold on to them for generations and are repaired constantly. So when I came to my teacher, I said, can I get a good pair of flutes? He just would laugh at me. He would just laugh at me, and I was this is very humbling. I have a set that works, but it's not wonderful. He said, that's good enough for where you are now. So Indians will tend to train on difficult instruments. That's the standard. So nowadays on internet, you buy everything and you have availability. It's incredible, right? But even now, to really get a good pair of these instruments is extremely difficult. You can get a decent pair if you're lucky. And then when the players get them, they actually tune them for their own style and such. So I worked with a very poor quality pair, but from Binglang wood, right? And I retuned it all myself for many years before I could get a good pair because he wasn't in the business of it. And the makers were, just not so excited to let them out to an outside person. So that's very appreciated, really.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Just like you have a little ranks and levels that you have to reach before you can get your hands on real quality stuff. Like just as you said, 20 years just to sound good, and maybe 10 years until you can play on a very quality.
It took a while, I can tell you.
And that wraps up the first part of our interview with Steev Kindwald and his fascinating journey through ancient folk traditions and unique musical fusion. I hope you're able to tell the difference between a chanter and a drone. And I hope you'll join us for the next week's part 2 interview, where we'll be discussing more instruments. Thank you all for listening, and take good care of yourselves.